Welcome, everyone. I hope everybody having a good day. This should be quick, 30, 40 minutes. I'm going to yield the floor to the attorney to go over our policies for meetings and some other things. So now, finally, it looks like we can have policy that matches across the board with our charter, and everything will be fair and boring. So, boring's a good thing. Okay, the floor is yours, Karen.
I want to thank council for being not only willing but enthusiastic about having some, what I'm going to call sort of training sessions and updates on what town policy. And the one tonight, we're going to be focusing on rules of procedure for town board meetings. Hopefully, we'll continue this series of events, possibly covering other topics. I just think it's super helpful, not only to the council, but to the public, to be informed on the rules of procedure, on the role of council, on the role of town staff, and what we as a municipality in the state of North Carolina are permitted to do and not do. So hopefully, we'll be able to sort of start an education program that benefits all of us and all the citizens of the town as well. Like I said, tonight we're focused on the town rules of procedure, and I've also added a couple, just some general topics on public records and open meetings that I think will be informative and that do tie in to these rules. I have handed out to everybody a draft document that's entitled Town Council of the Town of Indian Trail Rules of Procedure. For history, I just wanted to give a little background. The town council is currently subject to some rules that were passed in 2009. Those rules were based off of a book for suggested rules of procedure published by the University of North Carolina School of Government, and in the year 2000. In 2017, the School of Government updated those suggested rules to account for new changes to the statutes and for an update on best practices. They also did some rearranging and clarifying of several rules that had been confusing in the past. And so what you have in front of you is my work that combines the suggested rules of procedure, and it's the book you all have in front of you, contains most of these and some explanations for the rules. You'll find that very helpful, I'm sure. But it contains those suggested rules compared to and coordinated with the town charter, and also coordinated with town practices that we have historically done here in Indian Trail that are perfectly fine and that we are keeping as part of our process. My plan tonight is to go through these rules, sort of highlighting the big ones, and then really hoping for an interactive conversation with you all to answer questions and concerns that you may have about the rules. There are a couple in here that we're going to need to discuss because we can make the rule however we want to make it, and I would like to get council input on those rules, and then we'll come back at the January 28th meeting, and if we've been able to agree on these amendments, you all can pass these, and we'll begin operating under this new set of rules as of January 28th. So that's my goal, and hopefully we can all make that work. The first rule one is the applicability. So these rules apply anytime this council is meeting. Now, one important thing that I'd like to point out here is that meeting also includes when electronic meetings. Email's a new thing in Robert's Rules of Order. Nobody had emails when those were drafted. So email communication amongst council in North Carolina is likely going to be considered a public meeting. So my recommendation is whenever, I will always copy all of you on an email. In order to avoid turning my email into a public meeting, please respond only to me. Do not reply all to council emails. That's how we can avoid creating a public meeting, and we will not be violating open meeting rules via email. So that's going to be my recommended course of action. with regard to email. Quorum, this has been an issue in the past. Our prior rules of procedure were contradicted our town charter. This new quorum rule matches our town charter, and 3 council members in one place at one time constitutes a quorum. The mayor does not count, and so it can be 2 council members and the mayor does not make a quorum, okay? That's the rule. I'm not going to confuse us with what it used to be.
But can I interject and ask
Yeah,
a
please,
question?
absolutely.
In terms of quorum, how do you handle that from a social aspect? In that if this is a small town, there might be social gatherings where there's commonality in terms of friends. And, you know, I go to a party and Shirley's there, but Todd and I are on the dance floor. 3 of us in the party. The mayor is the DJ. I mean, I'm just saying.
Excellent question.
But the thing is, we're there to really socialize, not among just the 3 of us, but there's multiple people. It's not an open party, meaning open to the public, but it is a gathering in a public
Perfect.
venue.
So-
how do you avoid or guard against that to keep in line with the quorum rule?
All right, so what the rule that we're not worried about there is quorum. The rule we're worried about is an open meeting. And so to avoid violating the open meeting rules in a social setting, you will not be, because part of having an open meeting is that they are gathered to conduct town business. And so the fact that the 3 of you may show up, or 3 of you may show up in a social setting, if you are not there for the purpose of conducting town business, you are not holding an open meeting.
Okay, good.
Okay? So the caveat I have to this that is important, because we have sort of developed a conservative approach to this particular situation. Say, for example, Union County is has a public hearing on a adjacent lot that may affect Indian Trail, and all of you want to show up at a Union County board meeting, or 3 of you. That still is not going to be considered an open meeting, because it's not sponsored by the town of Indian Trail. What we will do is Kathy, as clerk, will post a notice of potential quorum, and that way we have informed the public that there may be 3 of you in the same room together, but no town action will be taken at that meeting. And so that's how we handle that. That's very conservative. It's probably not necessary, but because we want to act in a way that's very transparent to our citizens and explanatory to our citizens, that's a way of letting them know, hey, listen, we've got interested council members attending CRTPO, or a Union County meeting, or a school board meeting, or whatever it may be, and we'll let them know, don't be surprised if you see more than 3 of our people there gathering information on behalf of the town. So that's how that's handled. Social settings, not conducted for the town purpose, it would not be considered an open meeting.
If during a social function, 3 council members do discuss town business, and say someone that's in attendance hears this or sees this, what is that?
You're probably breaching your ethics. So that would be an ethical violation by the 3 members, to discussing. No town action would be valid. So you all 3 couldn't say, okay, tomorrow when we're in the council meeting, we're all going to vote. That wouldn't, you can't make a decision on behalf of the town. Under those circumstances, I would just suggest that you would want to watch your ethics and what your obligations are as a public official. You are obligated to follow the law.
And in the case of the CRTPO example, if the mayor or 2 council persons are planning on showing up, and a 3rd person just spontaneously shows up, how is that handled there?
Again, no problem, because it was not a planned, sponsored open meeting for the town. And again, no town business is being conducted. And again, all of these rules count on you all being abiding by your ethical obligations as public officials and leaders of this town. Okay?
Question for you, Karen.
Yep.
Okay, so if I go to Union County and want to make public comments, I need to make sure that I say I'm Mike Head representing myself. No one else.
I highly recommend that, yes.
Okay.
And unless this council has specifically and in a public setting delegated you as a spokesperson for a particular purpose, you are going to be speaking on your own behalf at any time like that. All right.
So, if, and let's say, if I communicated by email to everyone
Yes.
and got a positive response that I could talk,
That would not be,
That's still
a
not- okay, I'm
valid.
just wanna
Yeah,
clarify
That's a great,
all
and
this.
it's a great example, because
Yeah.
that it can so easily happen on Saturday. Hey, I'm heading to the meeting, would you all care if I said X, Y, Z? And if everybody says yes, you're still speaking on your own behalf. The action taken by that email would be invalid, because it was not conducted pursuant to the open meeting rules.
Okay, good, perfect.
Okay. All right, so the next topic that I wanted to bring up was the closed session rules. And just so that we're all on the same page about when it is appropriate for the board to go in, or for the council to go into closed session. This is a statutory right. So generally, all meetings must be open, but the state has given public bodies the right to go into closed session under very limited circumstances. As a general rule, these limited circumstances include to receive the advice of the town attorney or the advice of counsel, to discuss a potential or pending economic development opportunity, to discuss employment matters for town employees, and to discuss a real estate transaction or a contract negotiation. And so those are the basics. There's more, and there's some gray areas on this, but as a general rule, we are only allowed to go into closed session to discuss those topics. One thing that you all, in order to discuss the behavior or conduct of an elected official, that must be done in public. So we cannot go into closed session to have a grievance process with electeds. Yes, sir.
Just one question. Is there a caveat to the release of closed session information by an elected official that is punishable?
Again, when we are in closed session, you have an ethical obligation to honor the sanctity and the confidentiality of the information discussed in that closed session. There are legal concerns about whether or not the town waives, for example, its attorney-client privilege if a council member would leave a closed session in which some legal advice was given and discloses that to the public. Has the town waived its attorney confidentiality, rights to confidentiality, which is broader occasionally than what was actually discussed at the meeting. So it does raise a big risk for the town. It can kill a deal. It can kill a contract. And again, it would be a violation of your ethical obligations as council members. Probably the course of action that would be taken or could be taken, depending on the level of egregiousness of the disclosure, could be some sort of censor, that this council would censor that member for violating the closed session obligations.
In the event that information from a closed session is disclosed based on advice from the town attorney at that meeting, if a lawsuit arises from that, you would not be able to keep to the attorney-client privilege because that information or part of that information has been made public.
Right, if anything's been
So that
made
is the
public.
risk, that is the risk that we run there, in that you can't say attorney-client privilege because one of your clients has publicly disclosed part or some part of that information.
Could be, and that we would certainly, there's some hair on that, but I would certainly argue that any unauthorized disclosure is not an act on behalf of the town, so we would have some legal defenses to it, but
But you don't want to be in that
hey,
position.
listen, the cow's out of the barn, so it's a little too late to complain about it. So yeah, so that is, again, this is, you all are subject to the ethics of acting appropriately as elected officials, and maintaining the confidentiality of closed session is one of those ethical obligations. All right, special meetings and emergency meetings. A special meeting can be called for any particular reason. There's no emergency required. That it can be called by the mayor pro tem, or two council members. The procedures for how to make that happen are in here, but I think more importantly is who can actually request a special meeting. Emergency meetings are the same thing. The difference between a special meeting and an emergency meeting are the notice requirements, basically the notice requirements, and the fact that at an emergency meeting, you may not add anything to the agenda. So it can be on whatever topic is noticed as the emergency, but you cannot add anything else to that agenda topic. We have not had one of those in Indian Trail since I've been here.
These are open meetings, emergency and
yes.
Special meetings. They're open.
That's correct. Every meeting, now, that's a good point to bring up. So a closed session may only be called during an open meeting. So even if the special meeting topic is a closed session item, we would have to open an open meeting. Council would vote to go into closed session. We would have closed session, open closed session, then you would adjourn the meeting in public. So every single meeting that's called is open, and you can go into closed session from an open meeting.
Michael has a question.
Yes, sir.
You can't alter the agenda of a special meeting.
You can, so long as all board, council members are there, you can add to it, but that's the only time you can do it. If you do not have the consent of all council members or they're not all in attendance, then you can't add to the special agenda meeting. Meeting minutes. Every meeting of council must be recorded in writing. I believe all of our meetings are recorded, and again, that's council's discretion, so I think we have audio recordings of all meetings. And then we do have to have an actual written set of minutes for preservation purposes as mandated by the state.
Can I ask one question on that?
Sure.
In regards to our budget presentations, like the Saturday ones that we have,
Right.
the town clerk has to be present to record those from a written standpoint? Even
Some-
if we
yes.
have a record of as long as it's an open meeting that we've said that it's a budget meeting open to the public,
Somebody has to take minutes at the meeting, and that's
minutes.
generally the clerk's job.
okay. So then therefore she will go through, take notes, and produce that in addition to the recording that we have of the meeting, whether it's audio or video audio.
Yes, and by law, by North Carolina, minutes do have to be put into writing. There is the language in the record preservation laws state that it's got to be in a readable form, and the interpretation to date on readable form is pen to paper, so an actual document. And I think a bunch of that has to do with concerns that technology, say if you've saved it on a floppy disk, that everybody loses the technology to gather that, but nobody will lose the access to paper. I won't be surprised if that changes in the next several years, that they allow a different form, but right now, an actual in writing is required.
So I understand the writing is required. Is an audio or visual required in
No,
addition?
that's an optional.
Okay, thanks.
And again, that would be council's discretion. So if you don't want to record it, you don't have to. But we would have to have the writing it eventually. Just as Rule 12, just another note, and just a sort of an FYI, it is the public's right to videotape and broadcast public meetings. And it is perfect. There is no way for us to prevent someone from showing up and recording any of the open meetings. This sets up the rules for how that can happen, because we can regulate time, place, and manner. We just can't regulate the right to actually do it. And so these set up in the event somebody does come in, they can't put the camera right in front of the dais and interfere with other people's ability to see and that kind of thing. So we've got rules around that. And that's really just an FYI. So when you see people recording, it is their absolute right to do it, so long as they're not interfering with the meeting. Number 13, the agenda's been a topic that I've heard a little bit about in the last month or so. So I wanted to go through this with you. Generally, the town clerk and the town manager prepare the initial budget or initial agenda. And that means, because they are the two, then the town manager in particular is the one who can make sure that the business of the town that you all need to take care of is handled. And so the anticipation would be that the town manager would prepare the business side of the agenda. And then the mayor will review it, and if there's any extra topics that he's interested in, that would go on. In order for every council member is entitled to add agenda items. The process to do that is to provide the agenda topic 4 working days before the draft agenda is distributed. I will let you know, this is a little bit more restrictive than others, because usually it's 4 days, you have to have your agenda item before the draft agenda is circulated, which happens on the Thursday before a Tuesday meeting. And so we can adjust this as council would like, but effectively, if you want to have if you want to have an agenda item placed on the agenda, you have to have it to the town clerk before, 4 days before the meeting. And does that make sense?
So in essence, what you're saying, if we wanted to add something, actually it would have to be on the Friday, because if you distribute it.
Nope, it would have to be before the agenda is distributed on that
Monday,
Thursday.
on them like the Monday.
Monday before the Thursday that the agenda goes out.
Right.
But this is what's the reason that she's mentioning that is we as council can decide to reduce that amount if we feel 4 days
Right.
is too much.
That's right.
So now is the time, if you want to discuss that or further on, we can decide whether we think 4 days is good or we think
Right.
2 days is good. Something appropriate to give us time to be able to add an item if we so choose.
That's right. And frankly, so that everyone can see it coming. So the draft agenda goes out Thursday before the Tuesday meeting. And so if you wanted to add something to the agenda, is that right, Kathy?
Yeah, it goes out Thursday, usually around 5 o'clock.
Right. So the goal would be that any item that a council member would like to add would be to the clerk prior to that draft agenda going out the Thursday at 5 o'clock before the Tuesday meeting. The second way that you can amend the agenda is at a council meeting, you can request an amendment and it's something to be added to the agenda, and that does require the consent of council. And so it would be voted on whether that at the meeting, council has to consent. If it's done prior to the meeting in the time allowed by rule, you have it by right. So you can have that agenda item placed on the agenda by right.
So to be clear, presently, if we want to add if we want to add an item to the agenda, we have to have it to Kathy by when?
The way this is written, you would have to have it to her by Monday before
Monday.
the meeting, so a week before. Now, an alternative is to reduce that amount of time before the draft agenda, and that again is council's call. I don't care which way you do it. That would just be up to you all to determine the days that, how many days prior to the draft agenda going out, you would be required to have that to the clerk.
I'm good with Monday.
Monday's good. There is an agenda request form. Have you found it? Okay, so to keep things fair and transparent, somebody wants to, and I use it too. Fill it out. It has specific questions on it so that you give Patrick the heads up of what you may need, if it
Right.
costs any money, if there's information needed. And if it's something that's going to take longer than the 4 days to gather the information, it gives Patrick a chance to call you back and say, that's so much, I need a couple weeks to do that. Can we put this on the agenda for the following meeting? And explain himself.
How do you have, how's that request delivered?
You come into town hall, or they can send you one through email, or you can scan and it back, or you just come in, they can be able to get it at the front desk, you fill it out, hand it in, and they're supposed to hand it to either Kathy or Patrick. If Patrick's not available, Kathy, to get to him ASAP, so that he can make sure he has all the information you need.
So-
If I may, please, if it's a business item, forward it to me. Then Kathy and I, we coordinate the agenda, but Mr. Mayor brought an excellent point. Sometimes if it's related to something that will take some time, it's good to have it way ahead of time so we could prepare for it. So you'll help us out. Sometimes if the agenda is full, I could turn around and say it's going to require some time, and we have a heavy agenda. Are you okay with delaying that? Thank you, Karen.
If that is the case, do not be afraid to let us know that it is not doable.
Yeah.
In other words, I mean, I think we're all practical in that if it's not doable, it's not doable. so therefore we can always table it.
Yeah, absolutely. I will turn around from now on and say, council member, please, this is going to take a week to prepare. And if you don't mind, let's put it until next agenda. That will help us out.
Is there a way, and it should be simple, can we create a fillable form of it so everybody could have it via email, type it in, save it as a PDF, and then send it back? That's probably the most efficient way to do it.
Absolutely, we could do that.
Okay.
We could do that.
And that, do we have to put that on a council meeting, or can we
This is,
just?
I don't care how y'all do it. I
Okay.
just, this,
Yeah,
for
ask her
me,
if
it's
she can
just,
do
and
it.
I love
Well,
that there'd be a written record of
Somebody
somebody
can
making a
create it.
request.
We've got 3 smart people right there.
Patrick said
Yep.
he'll take care of it.
We'll take care of that.
This way, it could be emailed to them, they can type it in, you save it as a PDF and send the request out.
Yep.
So then the Monday still stands then?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, and that document would be, we would, and then just under what
I'm
we
sorry, I
just
didn't
talked.
hear the question. I'm
I
sorry.
didn't ask a question, I just asked if the Monday would still stand.
Yep, and
That-
so,
that's all.
and so that request, that fillable, or however we do it, or the paper request, or however you all want to get your request in, would be due that Monday before the agenda. And so, or before the meeting, so almost a week in advance.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Mr. Sadik, do we need to ask if we need the attachments with it in that same time frame?
Attachment to what? I'm sorry.
If there is any.
If there's any attachments to the request?
Right.
Absolutely, any kind of information, and I could see that Council and Karen are okay with Monday. Monday will give us enough time to get back with you and say, maybe we need some info from you. So Monday, 4 days before Thursday, very helpful for us.
With the attachments that they have, and then we can request other?
Right.
The only thing I would ask is that, Patrick,
Yes, sir.
as soon as you see it come through and you see it, just respond back, received, reviewing,
Absolutely,
so they know that you did acknowledge it.
that is correct. We will acknowledge receipt of the document and the request.
But in the event you're out of office, sir,
We will have someone.
Kathy.
could we not copy the town clerk just to
Yes.
make
I-
sure
I
we have
would-
a redundancy?
Absolutely. I think the town clerk will be the right person to receive that
Just in
item.
the
Yes.
event you're at a meeting or something.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do we need to document this on the rules or this?
No, we've got, what we care about is when it gets in, how y'all handle that with staff is not part of that. I'm good with that.
So if we want to add an agenda item, we send it in by 5 PM on Monday. When we send it to Patrick and to Karen.
Kathy.
Are we,
Kathy.
I'm sorry, Kathy. Flaw. Do we need to copy the council?
No,
No.
Okay.
no, you do not. And this is, like I
Our
said.
problem if we do, it's just so that council.
Absolutely not. Again, it's just, please, when you get that email, don't respond, don't reply all. That would be the only, because we're starting the open meeting. And again, the purpose of this is, I'm going to call it a by right option. If you get your request in this far in advance, it is a by consent of council if you do it at the meeting. And so those are the two differences, or the main difference in the method of getting something on the agenda.
Karen, quick question for you in regard to that. If we want to acknowledge the receipt of the item, should we do it to the person that is requesting or the entire council?
Person requesting.
Got it.
And that'll be their agenda item, and if they happen to send it to the whole council, if it's something you don't care for, please don't be nasty to the other. I trust all of you to be professional.
Yeah, that's why let's not reply all. Let's just pick up the phone and make a
You
phone
can
call.
pace back and forth in your own house anytime, but
Yeah.
we have, and all of you have been very professional, just experiences of the past, ghosts.
So, yeah, and hopefully this is clarifying the agenda process, and I think we've been a little lackadaisical on this, and I think this is a very important component and mostly because the agenda should contain enough information so that you are all prepared on Tuesday night. My goal is to make you all look good. The town staff's goal is to make you all look good. You should have an opportunity to review documentation, to ask questions prior to coming and sitting up here, because nobody likes surprises, you nor us both. So hopefully, if we get this system going, we'll thank you. We'll avoid some of the surprises and some of the confusion that we've had in the past.
So we had an item added to the agenda recently. Is that item, should it be on the agenda then, tonight,
I
for
don't know.
tonight's
I'm not
meeting?
aware of what we're talking about here.
That's the email that Mayor Pro Tem McIntyre had sent.
We are
On here
not,
for
these
approval.
these rules aren't in place yet, so I would say that if it's on
They're
the
here for
agenda,
you to
then it's
add.
good today,
They're
but
on the
starting
agenda.
at January 28th, we'll start putting this process in place.
This item is not on the agenda. It is on the agenda form, but for it to get on the agenda, it has to go for a motion where all of us, or the majority of us, have to approve. Then it gets on.
Right.
Perfect.
And same thing
But-
with removing. So if there's an item on the agenda that one person doesn't want, item can be removed by majority vote as well.
Thank you for that
and-
clarification.
Yep, and that's the amending the agenda, it's paragraph C of that rule as well. Okay, I'm gonna pick it up just a little bit.
One quick question, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Consent agenda.
Yes,
That's an important one.
yes.
Do you need if there's something on the consent agenda that I want, that I as a council member want to move to the, to either old business, new business discussion, whatever the case is, well, it will be old or new business because it's requiring a vote. Do I need the majority of council's approval to get that moved to this item at the beginning of the meeting?
No. So the purpose of a consent agenda is to address non-controversial issues that don't need discussion. If a council member believes that something on that consent agenda needs discussion, then it's removed by right. So if anybody objects, you could remove it off of consent by right. There's no vote on that. There's just a request to do it, and it happens. Okay?
Thank you for clarification.
Really quickly, I wanted to run through some roles of officers here on the council. First, the office of the mayor. The mayor's role is to preside over the meeting. So he's the gavel. He gets to open the meetings, close the meetings. He has the ability to call a recess, and he has the ability to adjourn in the event of an emergency. He will also coordinate conversation and discussion amongst council, and there are rules about how that should happen, and Mayor Alvarez is great about doing that. So I think that in order to help him out, raising of the hand and trying and getting attention, I think him sitting in the middle is going to be helpful, that we can all do that. But it should go, everybody should have a chance to speak, and so discussion should not be shut down until everybody has had their say. Generally, if somebody's already spoken, you will go to a person who hasn't spoken before going back to the person who has already had a chance to speak. So he handles that well, but just so you all know, that's what happens. In the event the mayor is not at a meeting, the mayor pro tem acts as presiding officer at the meeting. Now, the difference between the mayor and the mayor pro tem is the mayor does not have the right to vote in any situation unless there is a tie. The mayor pro tem, even when presiding, does have the right to vote. He does not lose his rights as council person to actually vote. In the event those two are gone, you all elect the person who's going to preside at the meeting, and that person has the same rights as the mayor pro tem. They do get to continue to vote. Let's see. I'm going to whip through some of these. Just one issue. So generally in North Carolina, there is no right to abstain from voting. The only reason that you can not vote is if you have a conflict where you have a financial interest in, or a family member has a financial interest in the item being voted on. There's some rules about zoning and contracts as well, but effectively it's a financial interest is the cutoff. A failure to vote historically and most of the time is considered a yes vote. So if you choose not to vote, your vote will be considered a yes for the motion that's before council at that time. The exception to that is, and this is one of the new rules, is on certain zoning matters. If you refuse to vote on that, you would just show an abstention, and that's the only case in council where you would be shown as an abstention is voting on certain amendments or supplements to a zoning ordinance. Just a rule. Additionally, I know we've had a couple situations recently on supermajorities. So there's a couple times when a simple majority is required, and that is or passing the first time an ordinance comes before a board for a vote, it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. So here, because we have 5 members, that would be a supermajority of 4 members would have to vote in order to pass a ordinance on its first trip to council. The second time, when it comes back up for a second vote, majority, simple majority passes it. And we just had that recently on a zoning ordinance. And so that's why that happened. That's, again, a special rule that's related to ordinances. We also, by policy or by procedure and by your determination, in order to amend these rules of procedure, we do require a 2/3 vote as well. And so it's a supermajority to require to change the rules of procedure. I'm going to stop. I think I'm running out of time. Am I, Mayor?
6:14.
17
6:13.
minutes.
17. Okay, let me go through one other thing that we really need to.
Everybody can stretch a little bit.
Yep. And one other topic, if you go to Rule 38 in appointments, you'll see a highlighted section down in 38B. This applies to a nomination in the event you have a vacancy on council. It is how the council proceeds to fill that vacancy.
We went through that.
Yes, we did before, but we didn't have a procedure in place. And so what this does is effectively provides a place to put a procedure. There's several different ways to do it. We can do it, you could select a nominating committee that brings recommendations. You can do it by simple recommendation and motion by individual board members or council members. So what I'm asking of you all is to consider how you would what procedure you would like to have in place for, in the event you have a vacancy on council, how you would go about filling that role, so that we have a set of rules to follow in the event that happens. Again, it can be very simple, it can be complicated, but the basic difference between the two approaches is you would have a nominating committee who selects a representative and suggests them to the board. The alternative is everybody can nominate someone and you vote until you get a majority, which is the chaos method. So again, it's something I just consider. We can talk about it more at the 20th meeting. I'll send some recommended language for that you can select and determine which one you like best. But to me, that's sort of an important thing you would want to address prior to being faced with that situation, and we just have not had a procedure in the past for that. Okay. Final note, I've handed out 2 other documents, and I've discussed the public meeting, the open meeting, the page that's entitled Open Meetings. And just a brief overview, as we discussed this earlier, a open meeting of this council happens when you have a majority of members meet to transact business. We discussed the email creation of an of a meeting by email, and again, my recommendation is please do not reply all in emails to the full council to avoid the potential of creating an open meeting there. When we do have a meeting, the requirements are public notice and that minutes are taken. Those are effectively the two requirements that will support an open meeting. But again, public notice is the biggest deal because the whole purpose, North Carolina elected officials operate in public with transparency, and the public is entitled to know when you are all going to be transacting public business. The second document is called Public Records Law and the Requirements of Council Members. Again, these are just general concept, but North Carolina is a very, very, very open state. The documents and records of the municipality belong to the citizens, with very few exceptions. So what does that mean for a council member? That means that practically everything, documents, emails, text messages, video, recordings, social media posts, anything that you create or receive while transacting town business will be considered a public record, and you must maintain those records. You cannot delete them. The Kathy, I don't remember exactly, but I do believe that these kinds of documents are to be saved forever. So there is,
Members and town manager, yes.
I'm sorry, say one more time.
Council members and town managers, the documents are forever.
Oh, so there you go. So if on occasion, the town will receive a public information request or a public records request from citizens or anybody, you don't have to be a citizen, you can be anybody, you will occasionally be asked to provide documentation to the town. If it's on your cell phone or on your computer, text messages, we will ask you if you have any documents responsive to this request, and we would expect that you would provide those back to the town. If, again, involves a transaction of public business.
But it has to be something from conducting business.
That's
In other
correct.
words, if I went to meet with somebody on a project or something,
Right.
and I sent a text with my personal cell phone, now the town issued my personal cell phone saying, this is the greatest thing,
Yes.
that through public record or something, they would ask me to provide
That's
that.
correct. And we
Okay.
would expect you to provide it, even if it's on your private cell phone, your private computers. And I highly recommend that for any recorded documentation, you use your town devices.
Because then it's easily,
That's right.
yeah.
It's easier.
Can you give an example of town business on social media?
Absolutely. So somebody says, I hate that project over there at Chestnut Park. And you replied, no, it's a great project. That's a town response. That's you responding in your capacity as a council member. That has to be saved. You all also, as a side note, on your personal social media pages, you are generally, this is very new law, but if you have created what's called a open public forum or a public forum on your social media page as a public official, you are not allowed to block or delete comments that may come back on your personal page if you're using it as a voice for your public position and for your operation of town business. It's a complicated area of law right now, but there's some recent case law involving our president and Twitter, believe it or not, that is driving some of this new law. It's fascinating. I mean, my lawyer geekness loves this, but it is just something to watch for. And in the end, I say stay off social media. So, it's impossible these days, but that would be my advice to public officials.
So if someone asks you your opinion on a project or something, you're just like, I have no opinion. I cannot
Don't
respond
respond.
or whatever.
Don't respond.
Okay.
I would just not respond. I mean, just say I don't respond to town issues on social media. That's be a fair response.
Perfect.
Okay, I know we've rushed through a bunch of this. I hope this was productive for you all. And again, my goal is that we all are looking at the same set of rules. Yes, sir.
On that social media, if someone asks you a question, would it be okay to just respond, you need to ask me that on my town email address and give it to them? Is that would be the best response?
You can respond however you're comfortable responding, but once you have begun the conversation on your own personal page, you have probably created a public forum that you are not allowed to block people from, and
So it's just best to stay away from it.
yep, best stay away from it.
Counsel?
I got one last question. So I had elect Mike Head Facebook page.
Yep.
It's still out there. Haven't touched it. Should it stay out there?
That would, in the course of your election, that would not be considered a town document.
Okay.
So that your,
So if I thanked everybody after I got elected, is that still?
I would say that'd still be part of your campaign.
Okay.
I think
I
that,
just
You're
wanna
not
make sure.
sworn in yet.
that's right.
You haven't
Right.
taken the oath of office yet.
Right.
That's why.
If you did want to discuss town business, that would be the appropriate page to do it on, not on your personal page.
It doesn't matter. Any page at all is, whatever social media platform that you set up, if you open a public forum and engage in dialogue with the public on town matters, then you have probably opened that up as a place where you may not delete comments and you can't block people.
Is that once you've taken the oath of office, then if you go and discuss any town business on your page, election page, or any page in social media, Twitter,
right.
Instagram, Facebook, you name it, it is opening yourself to public record that you cannot delete, block, or prevent anybody
That's
from
right.
commenting.
Well, and that's, and yes, and A, because it's a public record, and B, because of First Amendment rights. As you've created a public forum, you can't block people who are commenting on things that you don't want to. You can't block because of content. So they're free to put the content that, even if you disagree with it, on your page.
So council, please review these. If you have questions, direct them to the town attorney. If you see typos or something that concerns you, and make note to put this on the next meeting for council to discuss and vote on. Okay,
Helpful.
we've got about 7 minutes. Stretch. Do whatever you need to do. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I hope it helped, and please feel free to contact me with questions.
Let's walk around.